Okay, let's get started. Welcome to Sand and Staying Safe Online. I know you're not supposed to wear uh, complex patterns for TV or webinars or any of that stuff, but I decided that I was going to wear my Eddie Bauer plaid shirt because I am ready to go hiking in a national park this summer. In the spirit of summer vacation, I've got my Boy Scout khaki green shorts on, so I'm ready to go. I've got vacation on the brain today. If you haven't planned anything yet this summer like me, then you're probably thinking the same thing. You better get to it. Um, we are here to help you stay safe online while you do it. And I'd like to welcome our speakers today. Sarah Turpin, Senior Technology Consultant from Southwest Airlines. Thanks for being with us, Sarah.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And Chris Boyer, Vice President of Global Security and Technology Policy at AT&T. Thanks for joining us, Chris.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Let's get started. Let's just jump right in because I think we're going to have a lot of questions. And if you do have questions, please drop those in the Q&A. I try to monitor both the Q&A and the chat at the same time, but I would recommend if you've got an actual question, put it in the Q&A. That's easier for us to manage. And yes, this is being recorded and will be available afterwards. So if you need to step away, you won't miss anything. Sarah, let's start with you. With the summer travel season coming up, a lot of people will be using their devices in places like airports, like I did yesterday in DCA, connecting to public Wi-Fi in places like this. So, what risks does this present, if any? We hear a lot of sort of myths and rumors about whether or not it's safe to use public Wi-Fi. What's the verdict?
Yeah, I mean, with anything, there's always a little bit of inherent risk, and it really depends on what risk you're willing to take and being kind of your own risk manager. So there are lots of proactive things you can actually do when you're getting ready to go to an airport or a train station or a bus station to be really careful about those public Wi-Fis. So one thing you can do is make sure that your devices will not connect to an unknown network. So a lot of us, our devices, our phones will recognize our home Wi-Fi or maybe our work Wi-Fi. It's super easy. We don't have to think about anything. The last thing you want is your phone connecting to a Wi-Fi network that's actually controlled by a threat actor. So that's something really easy you can do anytime to just get ahead of it. When you are there and you're sitting in the airport, be really careful about what Wi-Fi networks you are connecting to. So if you see the name of a network, maybe it's on a TV screen that the airport owns, something like that, make sure you're connecting to the correct one and not something we call an evil twin. So that would be something that maybe there's one letter different. Maybe there's a zero instead of an O. Maybe there's an I instead of an L. And it looks like you're connecting to the right thing, but you're really connecting to something else. So that's something to be really careful about. In general, also, if you're using public Wi-Fi, just be really careful about, think about what information you're sending out over that network. If if you're sitting in the airport, think about, do you really need to be logging into your bank? Do you really need to be sending that email that includes really confidential information? Is it something that can wait? I also really like to make sure if you are going to be sending anything, make sure you're on a secure website. Always easily look for the HTTPS at the beginning of the URL. That's a great way to tell that you are on a safe website. So one other thing I will say I have seen in the news a lot is if you have an iPhone, don't accept airdrops from people you don't know in public.
Good tip. Very
For
good
a
tip.
variety of reasons. We've all seen the horror stories. So just something
Yep.
to keep in mind.
Chris, anything you want to add to that? I think the HTTPS was important when it was brand new, but now the bad guys are using it too. So when it comes to recognizing malicious websites, but do you want to I think there's a few places where I could bring this up today, but do we want to talk about whether or not you really need a VPN when you're using public Wi-Fi?
Well, I think you definitely should use a VPN if you're planning to access any kind of sensitive accounts or any kind of any account that you wouldn't want anyone else to have access to, right? So certainly validating that the site you're going to is the correct site, that it has HTTPS assigned to it, so it has some level of encryption, and also making sure that you're using a VPN if you're going over public Wi-Fi. Those are all steps you can do to at least make sure that you're relatively safe in making those transactions.
Yeah, there's a little bit of controversy on whether or not if you're visiting, chances are these days your bank account is the traffic's going to be encrypted, and so a VPN
Right.
isn't really necessary. I have actually found a VPN helpful for a different reason, kind of the opposite reason. So a lot of times I'll give you an example. I needed to access my pharmacy account while I was traveling, and it was a company that only does business in North America, so they block traffic from other sites, and I was abroad. And so the only way for me to access that was going to be to use a VPN and set my country to the United States so that that
Hmm.
website saw that as traffic from within the US and I was able to access it. So it can actually be convenient for that reason. It's a little bit of a workaround to the security measure the company has taken to make sure it's only traffic from the US. Um, any other comments about public Wi-Fi that you guys want to share? Or should we move on to the next question?
I would just say my only other comment is not as much about the Wi-Fi, but about just situational awareness in public. You're sitting around an airport, there's a lot of people around. Just be careful about what you're doing. Somebody could very easily look over your shoulder, see your username and password. So just always be aware of your surroundings.
Yeah,
Yeah, I totally agree
I
with that. I think trying to prevent just kind of like old school people snooping on you, knowing who's around you in the room, they can certainly see what you're doing online, especially when you're in a public environment. And if you're not using any kind of privacy shield or otherwise, then someone could be looking over your shoulder and seeing you log into an account or what password you're using. And a lot of folks, unfortunately, use the same password over and over. So if they get one, they then can use it for other sites that are more sensitive. So I think just knowing, I think Sarah makes a really good point. Knowing like what your surroundings are and who's around you is a really important thing.
Yeah, I haven't seen privacy shields a lot lately. When they were brand new, I think it was something that a lot of people purchased, and maybe it was too hard to use on a laptop while you're traveling or whatever. But that's a good tip. Those are still a really good idea, especially if you're doing work while you're out in public, and you're dealing with sensitive employer information. Okay. Sarah, let's talk about scams. So I was at a conference yesterday where it seemed like it was the most popular topic lately, scams and fraud. The losses have grown significantly if you look at the IC3 report that just came out lately. What kind of scams are you seeing in regards to booking travel, and how do you recognize and avoid these?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this is definitely a very hot topic. I think scam wise, what I'm hearing a lot about is just classic social engineering. So anything that seems too good to be true, or there's a sense of urgency, you need to book in the next hour or it'll be gone. So that's one really big
Which
red
is hard to
flag.
tell because sometimes you actually need to do that.
I
If
know.
the airline
Yeah.
is telling you there's only one or two tickets left at that price. So that makes it, I think, even more difficult, especially
Yeah.
in the summer when there's a lot of demand.
Yeah, and it's one thing if you're on a airline website or a booking website, that it is correct, it is trustworthy. It's another thing if it's on Facebook or a text message or a random email. So really those classic social engineering tactics that try to make us feel like we're up against the clock, we're going to lose out on a great deal, anything like that. If somebody's asking for payment through a kind of strange means, probably not going to be paying for a hotel in crypto. Like, let's be honest,
Good point.
probably not legit, but you never know. Another thing that's just really tough is technology is really good. AI is really good. So there are a lot of websites out there that are fake websites that have been created using AI that have reviews and photos and look perfect, but they're not actually real. So that's something to just look out for. Really be careful when you're researching and making those plans. There's also something that keeps coming up around, and this is really across the board, reward type scams where somebody may offer 50,000 points for your favorite hotel for only $200, and you jump on that deal and it's not real. So again, going back to those classic social engineering, if it seems too good to be true, there's a good chance it is.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, I
Somebody,
can't
as we were
reiterate
talking,
enough. Like, don't like. I get these all the time. Like, you get these texts on your phone, right? And it tells you to click on a link, and it could be about a travel issue, but it could be about I'm getting all these ones this week about from the DMV saying I have a ticket I didn't pay for, right? That's a
yep.
classic scam, right? So all what they're trying to get you to do is click on the link in the text message. You get the same thing in email. So Sarah makes a great point though. Like, don't click on those links, please. And if you are inclined to go check and see, like, oh man, maybe I do have a ticket that I didn't pay or something like that, or a traveling, just go to the website for the DMV. Just type it in yourself into the browser, and that way you'll know that you're going to the right site. But don't just click on a link they provide you, because what they're trying to get you to do is to go to a mock-up of the actual site and then provide your information. That's happening all the time, and I think you make a great point that those scams are getting more and more sophisticated. They look legitimate, but they're really not.
Yeah, and I think if you put together like data that's available on the dark web, I mean, I can think of a scenario where maybe like a rental car company has a data breach, and then you start getting the fake, the scammy, you owe a toll bill. Like if that's attached to, if somebody had data that actually made that look more legitimate to say like, oh, it was from your rental car, the last time you rented a car in the city or whatever, then that just makes it even harder for us to detect and even more tempting. So if you navigate directly to whoever's website you need to be on, whether it's the a toll or a ticket or whatever, like that's always the safest thing to do. Absolutely. Um, any other scams that you guys are seeing that are travel related? I think some of the best advice, like you said, Sarah, is if it's too good to be true, especially when it comes to the price. If the price looks too unrealistic, then that's a really good, really big red flag. Um, so Chris, while we're on vacation, we have a tendency to use our phones even more than normal, right? I think, you're on a road trip, you might be looking at email on your phone if you're the passenger, not while you're driving. But we have a
Oh, yeah.
tendency to use our devices constantly. Maybe you're looking up where to eat or the time the museum's open or, the hiking trail or something like that. So we're still on our devices a lot, even though we're on vacation, just maybe for different reasons. Um, how do we prepare? We're used to getting the laundry done and getting packed, but how do you prepare your technology when you're walking out the door on a vacation? Anything that people need to do before they go?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few things that you can do to kind of get your devices prepared to go, and really you should be doing these things anyway, right? So regardless of whether you're traveling or not, but certainly if you're going to go on a trip, there's some things you should do. One of them would be to make sure you back up all your device data, so if something does happen, you can get your data back. Another one would be to update all the security features on the device, so make sure that your device's software and all the security apps are updated to the most current versions. Another one would be to set up multi-factor authentication, especially around certain sites that you want to use that would normally have access to sensitive information. These are things like you can add a second factor of authentication, whether that's a PIN or a biometric or whatever other thing there is, but have some sort of multi-factor authentication set up. And the other thing I would say is make sure that you're using all verified sites and payment systems. So check the URLs in any sites that you're going to visit. As we talked about earlier, making sure that they're secure and using HTTPS, and any sites you have linked on your devices, make sure all that's updated. So I think really just backing up your device, updating your device and all your apps, making sure you have multi-factor authentication. Those are things you can do to have your device prepared for travel. I would say you should be doing those things anyway, all the time, but certainly for travel, that's certainly an added layer of protection. And then the last thing I'll say is most of the major wireless operators that are out there today, we offer different apps and services that you can put on your device that help you manage the security of your device. These are things like an app that most operators provide that will like detect and block certain robocalls, robotax, and other things that may come on your device. So I think those are other things that you take advantage of those apps where they're available, because they'll definitely help you protect yourself from those types of attacks.
Name of the AT&T service that blocks scammy stuff or gives you a warning?
Yeah, we have a app called AT&T Active Armor that you can download on your
Active Armor.
device, and that
Okay.
actually provides protection against robocalls and robotext. You can actually report robocalls and robotext, and it'll feed into a database that will actually feed into that device. It'll identify those and block those when they're occurring.
Okay. So look for that if you're an AT&T customer or for something equivalent if you're not.
Yeah, most of our
Um,
competitors offer similar services, so I think that's a capability that's generally available across the board.
Yeah, I was trying to get it on my mom's phone for good reasons because she's an aging adult, and there was a fee. It made me feel like I was going to pay for a seatbelt, so that was that wasn't good. Sometimes they're free, and sometimes they're not. Any other tips while we're on the go for staying safe that you want to include? Or did
Those are the primary ones.
Okay, good. Um, so I want to talk, and we actually had a question come in about this as well, about something known as juice jacking, that it's not safe to charge your device while you're traveling, like in an airport. The FBI put out a warning, gosh, I think it was probably a year ago now. It's been floating around for a little while. I've read here and there that there haven't actually been any proven cases of it out in the wild. But things like this, I think, do us a little bit of damage in the cybersecurity world because they do tend to instill fear in people. And so how does the average human distinguish between things that are a little bit have a little bit of myth or a little bit too much of a shock value in them, and then those things that we should really be concerned about? So I had somebody tell me lately, for example, that they didn't need antivirus software because they're using a VPN. And this is somebody very, very smart individual with a law degree, but not very, incredibly technical, and nor am I. Um, and then I realized as I started to pay attention, there's a little bit of advertising out there about VPNs that might be a little bit misleading. But how do we help the average bear tell the difference between something that's a little bit of got a little bit of myth in it? What do we think are the ways to, or are there things people should prioritize, for example? Sarah, do you want to take a stab at that?
Yeah. So yes, I actually saw an article warning about juice jacking about an hour ago. So
So
it
it's
is
still out there.
definitely still making the rounds. I think this is one of the blessing and a curse of the internet. We have access to so much information. It is really hard to determine what's true. I think with juice jacking, it was hard because there was an FBI warning. There were these very legitimate sources out there saying this was something that could happen. And I think what a lot of people missed was, like you said, it was something that is very possible. However, it's not very common. But that doesn't make for a great news article. Let's
Right.
be honest. So I think when I'm hearing about these new things that are popping up, I just really rely on just old school critical thinking. What's the source? What's the source's source? I'm a very data driven person. So what's the data behind it? How many cases are there? Is this something that's happening in the US? Is it only happening in Europe? And really making that risk assessment, and thinking, how likely am I to, if this is true, because it's always fine to err on the side of caution with
Right.
cybersecurity. If this is true, how likely am I to be in this situation? And what's in my control? So for juice jacking, I thought about, okay, airports, I see them in sports arenas, malls. So anywhere where, do I often find myself on a long layover and my phone runs out of battery? Or if I'm, traveling and I'm in, like I said, a sports arena and there's a delay in the game, things like that. What are some things I can do to prepare for those situations so that I don't even put myself in that situation to begin with? So for juice jacking, it's those little portable chargers that you can carry with you. Really easy to get, really easy to
Right.
carry. I have a couple of these little data blockers
Data blocker. Yep.
that you can plug in. So it basically has, a USB on one side, and then I've got a USB and a USB-C on the other. So that's something you can do, and that helps block anything other than just power coming into your device. You can use those. So it's really, like I said, about being proactive and thinking, if I do get into this situation, first of all, how likely am I to be in this situation? And what can I do to prepare myself?
Yeah, somebody did ask about those data blockers, and also having a power brick with you, like the battery, backup battery with you. So I think that's a good idea.
Mhm.
I think it also comes down to what do you have access to that a bad guy might want? I think if you're a highly targeted individual, if you've got access to things of value, if you're a senior executive, if you work in government, or you're you have privileged access, you work in IT at an organization. Because the thing about juice jacking to me is I wonder, like, this is not scalable. The bad guys have to have physical access, right? So for them to go around the country and do this, I mean, yes, there's credit card skimming and other things where you need physical access that, yes, the bad guys do, but that leads to money much more quickly. Things like credit card skimming, whereas something like jacking, just hoping that you randomly come across information as the perpetrator that's going to be valuable, that you're going to turn into money somehow, those valuable data or what have you. I feel like that's not as scalable a solution. Or somebody brought up in the Q&A QR codes. So I talked to somebody this week where, yes, their city had to stop using QR codes on their parking meter
Right.
signs because the bad guys were just coming around too regularly and putting stickers on of fraudulent QR codes. And that is another thing that's going to lead immediately to money, right? Because people are using their credit cards to pay for parking or whatever. So in those situations, you can kind of see where, okay, yeah, this is a crime that needs physical access, but it might be worth it to them. I'm not so sure that juice jacking, unless it's a case of foreign espionage and you're in an airport and they know you're going to be in that airport and they're really trying to get to a highly targeted person.
Yeah,
I
that
just
seems
don't
like
know
pretty
that
limited.
yeah, it's super,
I mean, I
super
think
limited.
ideally, I mean, so look, I've been in a situation personally where I've been traveling, had a really long layover, international flight, needed to
We've
charge
all
my
done it.
device, right? We've
We've
all been
all
in this
done it.
situation, right? So how do we
Mhm.
find it? So we all want to charge things up, but I think ideally you carry your own power cable, right? You
Yep.
just plug in your power brick and you charge it that way. If you can't do that, then I've literally at times gone to the store in the airport and bought a brick, right, to power the device
Mhm.
versus plugging it into those things. So but I think from a big picture perspective, right, we can't expect consumers to be able to keep up with every single thing that pops up in the news on cyber. That's kind of it's one of the challenges. I've been doing this for 15, 16 years now, and I feel like we put a huge burden on the consumer to keep up with all this stuff. And I feel like my advice to people would be just do the basic things that we've been talking about, and you'll be 89% of the way there. And then use common sense for the rest of it, right? So don't, so if
Mhm.
plugging in your device to a direct outlet that's not a power outlet, like plugging in like a USB-C cable into another one there, that's probably there's at least a little bit of risk associated with that, right? Maybe not a
Right.
lot, as you point out, the odds are pretty low. But if you can have your own power device, that's a much better solution to that particular issue. But generally speaking, if you follow the advice of the industry of having your own antivirus software, doing all the things we've been talking about with multi-factor authentication, and that's going to get you 80% of the protection that you need. You don't have to
Yep.
worry about all these different scenarios playing out, and just layer that with common sense about knowing your environment and where you are, then you'll be generally not have to be paranoid that something bad's going to happen.
We have a lot of questions in here about VPN since we brought that up earlier.
Yep.
So somebody's asking about free ones. Our recommendation is to look at things like Consumer Reports, Tom's Guide, PC Mag, anybody who's done a reputable publication that's done reviews of VPNs, because there are, every once in a while, you'll hear a story about a malicious one that's out there. So I would go with one of the bigger names that's been reviewed on but there are ones that are actually, absolutely a freemium model where you can start with something that's free and it's just fine, but you'd want to make sure that it's reputable. So we don't recommend, there's a few people asking us to make recommendations. We don't make specific recommendations. Just look at the review sites, the legitimate ones that do. Um, Somebody says they know the recommendation is always to, or at least often use a VPN. However, we get complaints from clients that connections are unusably slow. That does happen. Moreover, often the first troubleshooting step is just disable the VPN. Yes, exactly. So is it really needed if you're careful not to access sensitive information? I'm going to be honest, as somebody who works in this field, I gave up on mine a year or two ago because so many sites now are encrypted that I don't really think it's as necessary as it used to be. You guys want to argue the point, or what do you think?
I don't think it's necessary all the time, but if I was personally, just this is my personal opinion, not necessarily speaking for AT&T here, if I was accessing like my bank account or something more sensitive, I would feel more confident in doing that if I was using a VPN on top of the regular encryption. I know the banks are encrypted. I know that they use HTTPS, so they have tons of security precautions, but I still feel personally more confident if I'm doing that particular transaction over VPN. But if I'm just going on and accessing like a website, just to surf the internet or what have you, and I'm not doing making any kind of sensitive transaction, and I'm just using the internet to, pass the time while I'm at the airport or something like that, then I'm not sure you need to do that.
Is there anything you want to add to that? What do you do personally? What's your
No, I'm kind of similar. I avoid, just from a personal risk perspective, bank account, things like that. If I'm ever in public and need to do something for work, I use my work's VPN.
Yeah, and a lot of employers require that too.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
that is kind of my only absolute personally.
Hmm.
But other than that, it's really, you like Chris said, if it's a low risk website, if you're just browsing the internet, you're probably okay.
So something to think about if you've got a small business and you've got employees that travel and you have them doing business while they're traveling a lot, then you might want to provide a VPN to your employees. Somebody's asking if they're expensive. They are not expensive at all, like the consumer grade ones. Um, Few people have asked, why not just use your hotspot on your phone? Is that an
Well,
acceptable
that's another option,
alternative?
no doubt. There's no
Yeah,
doubt another option you can use, and I do that a lot of the time. In fact, instead of using the public Wi-Fi in the airport, I never use the public Wi-Fi in the airport. And I almost always use a hotspot tethering to my phone because I think it tends to work better for me anyway. But that's besides the point, and it definitely is a more secure option for sure.
yep. Okay, a couple people have asked about that. Um, so this is an interesting question. How about turning off your home network when you're out of town? That's one I haven't. I mean, we have a guest network. I mean, we've segmented our network for like our IoT devices, our home network, but I have not thought about, and it's not visible. You can't, there's nobody sitting outside my door with a Raspberry Pi. But I've never thought about actually shutting off the Wi-Fi to my house while I'm not home. I mean, I guess that's not a good idea if you've got devices on your network that are monitoring things about your home. Some people have really sophisticated home systems that are, attached to smoke alarms and sprinklers and all kinds of things. Um, any advice on that? That's one that I've never been asked before. So, John, congratulations. You threw a new one at me.
Yeah, that one probably depends on the circumstances, right? Like you're saying, like
Yeah,
at least I know for me personally, like I have my security system connected to Wi-Fi so I can detect like who's in and out of
right.
the house. So if I'm out of town, that way I know whether somebody, literally came up to the doorbell, opened the door, did a, variety of things around the house. So
Yeah, that's
that wouldn't
right.
really
My
work for
doorbell
me, but
camera wouldn't work. Yeah,
yeah, but if you're in a different environment, you don't have those types of tools. Maybe it's a more urban environment where people are coming and going more frequently. Then, or maybe your neighbors would have easy access to your Wi-Fi. Then maybe that does make sense. It kind of just, I would use, like I was saying earlier, use common sense, judgment there. And if you're going to be out of town for an extended period of time, and you're concerned that your neighbors might go on your network and use it, then it might make sense to turn it off if you're not dependent upon these other devices.
so somebody asked a little bit more about QR codes. Uh, I've seen a new trend of QR code scams from flyers in major cities. How do QR code scams work? So usually it's because the bad guy has replaced the existing trusted QR code. There's some sort of sticker or something over the one that is legitimate, or it could be a flyer that's not legit. Nothing about it is legitimate, and it's got a malicious QR code on it. What makes them particularly dangerous in public or professional settings versus online or email? Well, it's kind of akin to phishing, I guess, in a way, right? Um, I mean, a QR code is just there to take you to a website, just like a malicious link in an email might be taking you to a malicious website, right? Is that the best way
Yeah,
for
yeah.
Melissa to think about it?
Same exact thing. I think we call it quishing, maybe.
Phishing,
There's
yeah.
one of
QR
those,
phishing. Yeah.
portmanteau word, I don't know. But yeah, that's really kind of it is phishing. It's just hoping that it catches you with that one lure. So
Somebody asked if juice jacking can also be used in a hotel. So anywhere you see those places where you plug in your USB or USB-C or whatever it is, that it can happen, right? Like you said, Sarah, it could be a mall, it could be a hotel, it could be anywhere, as opposed to using an actual outlet. And somebody's added a
On that one, though,
link
I
for
mean, I think
Malwarebytes.
listen to your point earlier, though, like if it's a hotel room, like then you have to presume that somebody like was in the
Got
room
access.
previously and configured the room and
Yep,
knows like, and if they're targeting you, they'd have to know you're coming and you're going to be assigned that room. So like, do your own assessment on how realistic the risk is in that scenario, and
right. Somebody asked, just for clarity, is it dangerous to charge a device directly in a power outlet at an airport, for example? I've never heard
in
of.
a power out, I'm not aware of any issues there. I
No.
mean, there's no way for the power itself to get data off your device that I'm aware of.
Uh, let's see. USB charging station, that's what we're talking about there. Uh, do the airlines allow you to travel with those power banks? Sarah, do you know the answer to that one?
Um, they, I mean, always check with your airline, of course. I know there are certain batteries and power banks. In my personal experience, the ones that are going to be powering your phone are usually fine. I think you get more into the area that's a little tough when you start talking about things that might be powering medical devices that you need on flights or things like that. But yes, I think check with your airline. Some do have new rules about them. Um, that maybe they just have to be not in the overhead bin or things like that. But
Right.
your airline can always answer those
It
questions.
Yeah,
has
I
to
was
do
gonna
with
say like
the type of battery, right?
yeah, if it's a lithium ion battery, they
Mhm.
generally
Yeah.
don't want it to be like in checked luggage and put up in the bins. But I've traveled on like I can't tell you how many different airlines, and I've always been able to, if I carry it like in my backpack or a carry-on bag, and it's like it's a charger for like a laptop or a device or a phone. Generally, never had any issues with that. But you should definitely check with your airline to see what their policies are around that. But most of them, I think, require you to carry those in some sort of carry-on bag. That's typically what I see.
Somebody has a question about Bluetooth. Do you think you should turn it off when you're traveling? What would the
I
reason
would,
be to turn off
I
Bluetooth?
would
My
say
headphones wouldn't work.
if you're not using it, you probably don't need to have it turned on. But I will say if you are using Bluetooth, I actually ran into this last summer. I got into a rental car and went to pair my phone for navigation and music,
Whoops, are we losing Sarah a little bit?
whatnot. There were probably 5 iPhones already paired with that car. So if you do, you guys.
Okay, I think Sarah's connection. Chris, can you hear her or is it just me?
No, it was breaking up on me too.
Okay, so I think what Sarah was talking about, Sarah, maybe
I
I don't
think
know
I'm starting to hear you guys.
if you can prioritize your device on your home network. I'm going to do that for mine right now in case you have that feature. Um, I think what Sarah was talking about was sorry, go home. Um, oh, you're back. I think we got you back. Rental cars and syncing your contacts and everything, syncing your phone to your rental car. She's frozen again for me. Chris, do you want to talk about that a little bit? That's been
Yeah.
controversial here and there. I think when it first
Yeah.
started, when you could hook up your phone to a rental car,
Mhm.
there were more concerns, but I
So
think there are
there
fewer
there
concerns.
were it
I think Sarah's network is crashing as we
I
speak.
think Sarah's network's got a problem. Chris, why don't you talk to us about that? And let's
That's
see
something
if
I haven't looked into that much, honestly. I mean, definitely traveled and been in that situation where I'm trying to do like, I get a rental car and I'm trying to do like Apple CarPlay on the car itself, and it'll ask if you have access to all your contacts and stuff. I generally have not done that. but I don't know that that data is actually stored on the car itself. It's typically
Yep.
on your device. So I think even if you share that information, I'm not sure that the actual information is actually stored on the car, so that when you're no longer there with the device, that it's still accessible to anyone else.
Yeah, that's actually so I think when that kind of connectivity, I was still working in the auto industry, I think when that kind of connectivity was brand new and
Mhm.
it has changed. So yeah, it is the case. You'll get into a rental car, you decide to pair your device and give it all that access. And as you're doing that, you'll see all the other phones that look like they're still connected. But that data is no longer accessible. So I still, as a matter of course, will delete unpair my phone from a rental car just because I'm paranoid like that, and just I don't know enough about every manufacturer's systems to completely feel like that's something that I don't need to do. Um, but I know by and large most vehicles that data won't be accessible anymore if you see a bunch of other phones listed on
Yeah, the
there.
data is not literally being transferred from like your phone onto like some hard drive in the car itself. It's still the car is accessing the phone to read the data. Or it's like so it's like a read-only option, but
Yep.
that's my understanding. So I don't know that you have to be have to deny the request so you can have CarPlay work. But I agree with Lisa that you should, when you turn the car back in, just delete it off. You don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, it's not a bad idea. Um, let's see. Somebody says definitely forget your device before you turn the car in. Um, yeah, not a bad thing to do. Um, as far as you are aware, is RFID skimming a real concern? So I know people that will use RFID wallets and things like that. I've read cases of it happening, um, but I don't actually use one, and I don't know anybody that it's happened to. Not that that's a good metric, not that that's scientific. What do you guys think? Somebody getting close to you with a device that can skim RF your credit cards, for example, or
I'm with you. I haven't heard anything of it happening a lot. I think it's one of those things that I'm sure could happen, but I really haven't
Yeah, I
I
seen a
haven't
think
lot
for
seen
of
it.
me,
evidence.
I'd be more concerned, especially traveling, like if I'm in a big city, if I'm in Naples, Italy or something, I'm in a big city that's kind of known for some of its street crime, like pickpockets and things like that. I'm going to be more concerned, honestly, about the physical crime of a pickpocket
Yes.
than I would RFID skimming. So that's the thing. You're having to perform these judgments, these risk analyses all the time. And so I think that's one of the things that make it a little
Yeah,
bit more
I think you have
difficult
to
for
assess
people.
like what's the lift for the average criminal to do something like that versus just stealing your device. Like if I literally have had colleagues of mine who've had been walking through the airport in some places with like a backpack. If they leave it like unzipped, somebody's actually stolen the device out of the back. So that kind of
Right.
thing can happen. So I think just knowing your surroundings and kind of where you are in the environment is probably the most important thing. And then, if somebody's really going to go through that many hoops to get access to it, that's probably not all that likely. But I think you should just be aware of what's going on around
Somebody asks if password managers are safe to use while traveling. What about when you're offline using a password manager on your phone, I guess is what they're asking there. Um, I can't think of one where you logging in is not going to be encrypted, where that traffic isn't going to be encrypted to your password manager. I think that's the important thing there,
you. Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I think
Um,
password managers themselves, I don't think are risky, but we should still follow all the other advice that we've been talking about earlier on the call. So like you don't want to like if you're on a plane and somebody and you're logging in your password manager, just can have all your passwords there. Somebody could be looking over your shoulder or whatever's happening there. So you need to make sure that you're at least if you're going to do that, then try to take the other basic precautions we've been talking about here throughout this webinar.
yeah, so somebody else is recommending, hi Jake, he's recommending using a privacy screen. A little bit more about password manager. Somebody's asking what is the good and the bad. So I'll chime in on that a little bit. So we do a survey every year called OBehave, a research study, and we ask people how they keep track of their passwords. And we've got a long list that people choose from. And if people write in new genius ways, we add those to the survey the next year. And what we found 4 years in a row, I haven't seen the data yet from this year. We're in data collection mode right now, is that the good old password notebook is the most popular way. And that's been controversial. I always worry about theft or loss. Even if you say, oh, I keep it locked up in a drawer at my home, are you sure you never take it on vacation or you never take it to a coffee shop? Like, is that really the case that it's locked up all the time? Um, we are still big fans, personally, like our organization, of password managers because it encourages better password habits across the board. They're going to tell you if you're using one that's too short. A lot of them will tell you if you're using one that's for sale on the dark web, things like that. Um, but the reality is, for somebody who's maybe in a situation like my aging parents, where anything my mom writes down is probably not leaving her place. Um, if you treat a password notebook like it's cash, if it's locked up all the time, if nobody has access to it, if they're in your home, um, if it helps you to have long, unique passwords for every account, then it's a matter, nothing is 100%. It's a matter of sort of better solutions and worse solutions. The solutions I really don't like that people come up with are things like a spreadsheet on their laptop that is maybe password protected, but if you get a malware infection on that device, the only thing between the bad guy and all your passwords is that one password protecting that spreadsheet that they have to crack. A note on your phone. I really don't like that one either. Somebody said, well, I don't have a spreadsheet that I store on my laptop, but it's in the cloud. Is that okay? No, that's not okay either. So it's a matter of better or worse. The one thing that some password managers, including the one I use, has started adding is MFA within the password manager. And my husband started using it. I had to say, you know what? That's all your eggs in one basket. If the password manager does have a breach, which is I think pretty unlikely these days because that industry's gotten more mature. If they have access to your password and access to the MFA code, then that makes me a little uncomfortable. So I'd rather have MFA that's happening outside of the password manager, like a push notification to an authenticator app or something, or even a text or a code that's been emailed to me. So anything you guys want to add to that? I think they're the best solution for me because I'm on the go a lot, and with facial recognition, I can access my password manager really quickly, and having authenticator apps on my phone helps too. Um, but nothing is 100%. So you got to choose what's best for you. Anything you guys want to add?
No, I think that's right.
Okay.
I do the same thing.
Um,
So
so some people have some doubts about somebody says, aren't you far more likely to use poor password practices than the password manager is to be breached? Yes, absolutely. Like people have um that's Susan, that's a really good point. So people tend to get worried about things that are low risk, like, oh gee, I'm not sure I should use a password manager. But then what they do is they continue using the same probably already breached password on way too many accounts, or they continue to use very short passwords. So it's far more important that you fix those bad habits. And if a password manager helps you do that, then I would worry a whole lot less about the risk of the password manager than I would about the risk of the bad habits of reusing passwords or using passwords that are too short.
definitely.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about that. I mean, a lot of people you reuse the same password over and over and over, or like you said, use simple short passwords.
Yeah.
So if the alternative is to use more complex passwords, but you need a password manager so that you can keep up with all the complex passwords that you're using, much better option than just sticking with like the same basic password across the
Yep.
board.
So somebody says, would you recommend taking a photo with a few sets of user ID and password that are needed in the trip and save the photo in the photo gallery on your phone? No, I would not. I also wouldn't recommend storing like pictures of your passport or your driver's license or things like that. Password managers have a way to do that. In most vaults, you can store credit cards, you can store forms of identification. It's super, super handy and much better than taking storing photos in in a photo gallery. Anything you guys want to add about that?
Definitely
No?
agree there.
Okay. Somebody's asking, how do you know if a password has been breached and is available on the dark web? There is a website called Have I Been Pwned? Lucas, if you can put that in the chat. This is a website that will tell you if you have credit monitoring services, maybe from a previous data breach or something. A lot of times it's included there. And some of the password managers have that feature of dark web monitoring and will tell you. Every once in a while, I actually get an email. I think Google is doing it for me, and I'll get an email in Gmail telling me, hey, this password is for sale. This is why it's so important to always use multi-factor authentication, because even if somebody has access to your password, if they don't have that second factor, they can't get into your account. So somebody said, what about using notes that contain clues to your password or your login credentials, but not the credentials themselves? So I get asked this question a lot, almost every talk I give every October. And the problem there is that what you're not focusing on is the length and the uniqueness of that password, right? So that might be, you know, we can debate whether or not it's safe for you to just have clues. But the bad guy isn't trying to figure out, he's not trying to answer, uh, guess your password based on those clues, right? We have this tendency to think that people are trying to figure us out. They're not, this is big data. These are technical solutions that they're using. Nobody's trying to decipher that about us, like trying to figure out what all those clues add up to. So if I'm using a password cracking tool to crack a password, I don't care what the clues were and how you came up with it. If it's too short, I'm going to get in. So that's what's more important is the length. And like we've talked about, the uniqueness so that you're not using one that's already been compromised, or you have one account that has a data breach, and then because you've used that same password across so many other accounts, then you're at risk. I used to think before I got in security 10 years ago that like that didn't sound like that made sense, because how would the bad guys know where I had other accounts? Well, guess what? They don't need to know. They are using technology to just spray and pray across the internet to see what a password will get them into. So
Right.
they're more sophisticated than I think most of us realize, and I'm going to blame the hacker in the hoodie pictures that that make these things seem like there's just kind of like this one individual out to get us. This is a business. It is somebody's job to try and get into your accounts. Um, so some of these things that we think would
You
be,
mean it's not some kid in their garage or their
it's not some
basement
kid
that's
in
hacking into
mom's
everybody's
basement.
account?
No. Um,
Seen in the movies, right? It's totally
yeah,
different.
exactly. Why don't we talk a little bit about, let's see, have we discussed phone wallets to store credit cards? Yeah, Chris, why don't you talk about that? How secure is that wallet on your phone to store your credit cards?
Well, that's a good question to ask Apple or Android or Google,
Do you have
but
an
yeah, no,
opinion,
I
though?
mean,
You're in the
I personally
telecoms
do use.
industry.
Yeah, I mean, I do use that myself to store
Me
my
too.
cards. I do think it's a pretty efficient way to use it, and I've never had any security concerns there. Obviously, just like with anything else, if you're going to use it, make sure that you're taking the basic precautions we talked about previously. So you use the security tools on the device itself, you use all the different apps out there. Make sure you keep your operating system updated, so you have the latest versions of that. That's pretty critical if you're going to use that type of tool. But overall, I think it's a pretty effective tool, personally.
Yeah, lock your device, right? Even if it's a biometric. We have some questions about biometrics. We'll talk about that in a second. Somebody's asked, this is another question where a password manager is the answer. Is there a place or a way to recommend saving your phone PIN or a master password somewhere for your next of kin if needed? We had a scenario where a family member passed away and nobody was ever able to access the phone. There's a way in some password managers for you to store information that would be accessible, or for you to share access, particularly if you have aging family members. So if there's a scenario where you are sharing credentials with a family member, I'll give you a real simple one that Sarah, you probably see all the time. One family member is going to book tickets for the whole family and say, I want to log into my husband's Southwest Rapid Rewards account to book using his miles for the whole family, for example. Using a password manager to share those credentials is much safer than me asking him to text a password to me. And then because what usually happens then is not only has somebody texted you their password, but then you also end up asking them to text you the MFA code, which is not a good idea. So I can recommend password managers if you look at some of the review sites and you particularly look for features that would allow that kind of sharing or allow have features that address that specific situation, because we are seeing that now. The more digital our lives are, when somebody passes, like getting access to information that you need and everything is, even if you have a death certificate and all that good stuff, it can still, we hear a lot of stories, it takes a really long time to work through those processes.
A lot of
What is
password managers
considered,
have the ability to share like just certain passwords too. Like you can group your
right?
passwords into groupings and you can say like, here's your financial accounts and here's like online sites and you can share
Yep.
certain passwords with certain people. So you don't have to share like access to the password manager itself. You can kind of pick and choose which passwords you want to share. So I find personally that that works for certain things. Like, like when me and my wife want to log in and access like the school websites to see information about school and grades and things like that. Like we share a lot of those passwords through a manager, and we have it segmented off. So we have a bucket for educational sites and another bucket for financial ones. So that way you can kind of you can pick and choose what you want to share with whom.
Yeah, and I think for travel sites, it's even more necessary because if I'm traveling, if my husband and I are traveling together, we might decide like, oh, let's use your hotel account, not mine, because we want the points on yours, or you're earning more points than me, or whatever. Like, so for those of us who have gamed all those systems of figuring out how we max out all our points everywhere, you do end up, especially in a with a partner. Um, there's some advice on here about passwords and a question on what we consider too short. The government and the National Cybersecurity Alliance now say, I think it's 15 or 16 characters or longer. So think about maybe a passphrase, or again, I'm gonna recommend a password manager because it's really hard to keep track without one if you're gonna have passwords that long and they're all gonna be unique. So so what about biometrics? Every once in a while we'll hear concerns about, I don't want things scanning my face. I went through a TSA pre-check yesterday and they took my picture. They don't store that information. That doesn't concern me. And you guys can debate this with me, but my opinion is that if using facial recognition, for example, is going to make me more secure because it makes security more convenient, then I am more apt to do that and less worried about privacy concerns. But what do you guys think? Do you use facial recognition or biometrics regularly?
I mean, I use Clear at the airport all the time. So yes.
Sarah, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of the same way you are, you know. It's one small part of a bigger picture.
Right. Yep. What about using social media while you're traveling and posting photos and stuff like that?
So that's a really
Oh,
good
this
question.
is
Go ahead.
oh, I was gonna say one of our big things is please never post a picture or screenshot of your boarding pass on your social media. That gives someone everything they need to know to completely ruin your trip. So please do not do that. Chris, did you have something to add?
I was gonna say the same thing. I mean, my general rule of thumb on that is just using common sense. Like, don't post your, don't post your boarding pass, your itinerary, or all your locations that you're planning to go to, or how long you're going to be gone, so people can't use that information against you. And then, to the extent of posting pictures while you're on vacation, I mean, that's a judgment call, I think, to some degree. Depends on what account you're posting it to and who has access to see those photos. But I would try to use common sense there. In a lot of cases, I post them after the fact when I get back, and it just depends on the circumstances, really. If it's an account that's like closed to the public and only available to your friends and family and things like that, maybe it's less of a concern than if it's something that's like wide open to the entire public. But I would just urge folks to use common sense when they're trying to deciding what they're going to post on the web.
We have a couple of questions here about um, how to be careful when you're searching for airline or hotel or travel company support online. And a few comments here about SEO. I think they call it SEO poisoning, where you've got malicious actors that are just as good at search engine optimization and they know how to run an ad just like a legitimate company. Do you guys want to talk a little bit about that? We've got threat actors using SEO to put their websites ahead of legitimate websites. Like I have seen that happen.
Yeah, I think for me, I personally try never to click on something that says it's an ad in search results just for that reason. Chris alluded to it earlier, but if you know the website, so if it's a major brand, just type it into your browser yourself
Right.
is really the best way to make sure you're going to the right place.
Exactly. That's what I would do. That's what I would recommend doing. If you're concerned about that, then definitely the right approach is just to type in the name of the URL or the website. That's safer than clicking on any kind of link.
Any scams that you guys have heard of in regards to global entry or visas to different countries, anything like that? We have a few people asking about international travel. I have not heard of any visa related scams. Doesn't mean they're not out there, but again, I
Yeah,
would make sure you're on a legitimate website,
I
right?
was going to say the same thing. I am not aware of any, but my guess is given that there's scams and everything these days, I wouldn't be shocked. Wouldn't be shocked.
One more comment about social media. We have another question here. I think uh, sharing pictures while you're on vacation, it just tells people that you're not at home. So you're going to want to make sure that your friends list is private, and that you actually know everybody that's on your friends list. And that, yeah, I mean, what's happening these days, it's very, very common, is people will lose control of, for example, their Facebook account and report that to Meta that they've lost control of it. Meta has no way to prove that that was your account or wasn't, because if you think about it, you don't have to submit your driver's license or your passport to have a Facebook profile. So the number of fake profiles out there or of legitimate accounts that were then taken over by a malicious actor is very, very high. And so even making sure that everybody on your friends list is actually, somebody who has control of their account. A lot of times we will hear from people where they've lost control of their account. Meta hasn't given them control back, and it's still in the hands of a bad guy, and it also hasn't been removed. And so you think your friend is recommending that you invest in crypto or go to a certain travel website, and it turns out that's actually a malicious actor, and there's been that's how a lot of scam losses happen. It's a very common scenario. So these days, where I would have said a couple years ago, as long as your friends list is private and only your friends can see your posts, I wouldn't worry about it. But these days, with just how complicated it's gotten and people losing control of their profiles, I think I'd wait till I was back. What do you guys think?
I mean, that's the safest play for sure.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. We have a few more questions here. Maybe we can do a blog post or something to snag some of the topics that we didn't cover today. But we are out of time. I want to thank the audience for all their questions. There's some really good conversation going on in here and some really interesting questions. I want to thank Sarah from Southwest Airlines and Chris from AT&T for joining us today. If you want to hear about more good content like this, then go to StaySafeOnline.org and sign up for our newsletter, and you'll know every time we're holding a webinar. And again, will be recorded and available afterwards. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.